Hello and welcome to the Trading with Ashley show. In this particular video, I am going to focus on my very favorite strategy for generating income. This is all about how to properly sell covered calls on your positions. The reason I'm just so interested in this particular way to generate income is this is how I first got into selling options. I was sitting on top of company stock that I had been accumulating over the years after being an executive in corporate America for almost 30 years. And once I learned how to trade options, I realized I just had this powerful money making tool in my portfolio just sitting there waiting for me to sell covered calls on it. Now, let me kind of basically explain to you how this works. If you have 100 shares of a stock, then you are eligible at that point to sell covered calls on your stock. Now, when you sell a covered call, what you're doing is you are telling your broker, I am willing to give up my shares as long as it gets to the strike price that I specify on the date that I specify. And the best part about this strategy is if your shares are called away in profit, so you got them at one point and you're selling them at a higher point through the covered call, you cannot lose money. So that's what's so great about this strategy. Now, when you see it in your broker, you can select a strike price that is too low and it can go much higher and you can leave money on the table, but you can't lose money. You can just see in your broker, it'll show a negative next to your position if it's pushing higher than your strike price. But I don't want that to intimidate you because you're not really losing that money. It's just showing the money that's being left on the table. So that's a very important distinction. And quite frankly, I think that the brokers show it that way in hopes that you will buy the call back and get out of the position because in that scenario, they win. So I want you to all be careful and not let the way it looks on your broker in your account. I don't want that to intimidate you to the point where you don't sell covered calls because you think you're losing money. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through, I have well over 45 positions in the broker that I am about to show you, and I have just selected 5 ticker symbols to sell covered calls this week. And you're going to see by the premium that I am able to get from selling the covered calls, that will equate to well over $10,000 a month. And this is how I make my income. It's through selling puts and then selling covered calls. So this video is all about covered calls. I'm going to take you into the broker. I'm going to show you the perfect conditions to sell a covered call and tell you how to select the proper strike price for your covered call. Because ideally, if your shares are called away, you want to be able to regain them at a reasonable price. You'd hate for your shares to be called away too low, and then you're chasing, trying to get that stock back in your portfolio, but it just keeps running higher. So if you follow the rules I'm about to share with you, you'll have a much better chance at ensuring if your shares are called away, that you can get them back at a price lower than they're initially called away at. Before we get started, I want you to commit to one thing for me. Will you, after you watch this video, if you learn just one thing, will you please subscribe and then send this video to one person? That's all I need you to do. If you do that, I will keep making content like this so that we can be sure to educate everybody that wants to learn this lucrative life hack for making money. The first thing I want to do is go to my account and take an overall assessment of how we're doing. So right now, I'm very proud of this figure. This particular account, when I retired a few years ago, I started with $540,000, and here we sit about 2.5 years later, and it's at almost $1.3 million. And I have only taken money out of this account. I have not put any money into the account. So there's real power in trading versus just sitting on the sidelines. And that's what I specialize in. And so what I want to do is I want to go and look at all my holdings, and I like to sort them by those particular plays that are winning, because you wouldn't want to sell covered calls if your stock is red and not making any money. And so when I go down here, let's just see how much money I can make if I look at some of these first additional stocks selling covered calls this week. And we're going to look at these individually to make sure it's the optimum time to sell covered calls and what strike we might be looking at. So here we go with Pltr. This is my largest holding. And I'm very proud of how I've nursed this stock to now have 143% return on this stock. Now, this is just one particular grouping. I've actually wheeled this stock several times. My largest position I established when it was around the $12 to $13 range. And I know several of you out there that are Palantir Maxis, you were getting it closer to $6 and $7. So even more impressed with what you've done. But let's look and see what I can do with this. So I have got 5,000 shares, and let's just say I want to sell covered calls on half of them, just in the event that they are taken away. Now, this is a Roth account, so I'm not as concerned with the capital gains if this actually gets called away. So that's helpful. If you do have to worry about a taxable account, you want to consider how many of these you sell. But if we look at this position, it's obviously up quite a bit. So if these were taken away from me, it would be in profit. And then I would start selling aggressive cash secured puts. And this is interesting. This is how I reestablished this position. I did have shares called away and I wanted them back so bad. So I boldly went in and started selling at the money puts, and it was giving me great premium. And that's how I reestablished my position in Palantir after they were called away. But let's look at this. So this is our pricing right now. We're at $67. So first thing we want to do is go look at this on a Bollinger Band. So let's go to Yahoo Finance, and I put in my ticker symbol right here, and I want to see where it is in its price life cycle. So first, I want to look and make sure earnings aren't around the corner, and they're not, so we should be good. It's very important when you're selling covered calls that you do not go too far out, because this price could run away, especially a stock like this where they'll have a government contract come out and then it just starts flying again. And so if we look at this, I want to sell a weekly. Well, I'm going to look at a weekly call. So I'm going to change this from 1 day to 1 month. I like having that extra 3 weeks in there to see how my stock is performing. And here we go. We are looking at the Bollinger Band, and we are definitely in an overbought scenario. Anytime this is over 70, this is my RSI, you're in an overbought territory. And it can stay up here for a while, so it doesn't automatically start coming back down, but at least it's good to know that we are at the top of our range. So we're at 74 on the RSI. And then if we look up here, we are sitting right at around 67. And my Bollinger Band at the top is about 73, let's call it 73.50. And so more than likely what will happen if it gets up to the top of this, it will retreat and start pulling back down. And you can see that it has done that. It's kind of floated sideways for a while. And then here it came outside of the band, and then the band expanded a little and it was back under the band. If you just kind of look back over it, you can kind of see it really does respect the band. As soon as it comes out of the band, it usually is back under the cover of the band. And so I don't want to lose my shares. I just want to generate income. So with that being said, I'm going to shoot for something above the band this week. And what I want to look for, the very first thing I want to consider, there's 5 trading days this week. So the first thing I want to look at when I am trying to make this decision is, are we having a green day? And so let's say we open up Monday and we're charging ahead again. And then it would be a good time, as long as we're having a green day, to consider selling this covered call. And I'm going to next go to my option chain and take a look at it. But remember, I want to go above 73.50 ideally to ensure that if my shares are called away, that more than likely it will pull back and I can regain my shares lower than they were called away. Now, once you get to the chain, you got to pull up your expiration date. I really encourage all of my students not to go further out than 1 week on these bullish stocks, because once they get into that situation where it blows past their strike price, it can be very frustrating and they can be rolling indefinitely. It is an option to roll, but I don't like them to go too far out and then they end up having to push the rolled situation out to the middle of next year, and it's just hard because they can't make money on it if it's just sitting stagnant. And so I'm going to look at 12/6 as my expiration date, and then the calls are on the left. And so remember, I told you 73.50 would be a good starting point. Well, they don't have that, so let's look at 74. The next thing I want to look at is my delta. So right here is a 0.1 delta. which it's about a 10% chance that 74 will be in the money. That's a very low chance. And so this might be a good one for somebody like me that I really am not interested in giving up those shares. And what it's paying in premium is 21 cents a share. So for every contract I have, I will get $21. Now, because I have 5,000 shares, I have the ability to sell 50 contracts. But remember, I only wanted to do 25 contracts. So using this very conservative $74 strike price, this will yield me $525 this week. And if we get to the end of the day on Friday, 12/6, and Palantir has not yet breached 74, then I get to keep all of the money I made. In this case, it would be $525. Now, if it is breached and it's just barely breached, I may allow the shares to be called away. And then I will enjoy all the price appreciation that you saw. And then I'll just go ahead and try to get my shares back at any price under $74, and I'll be happy at that point. So right now, with that being said, we're at $525 on half of my Palantir shares. Next up is Tesla. Wow, look at Tesla. This has risen 54% since I established my shares in Tesla, and I've got 500 shares. And so I'm going to go ahead and price out what it would look like if this is a real good time to sell covered calls. I'm going to take a look at what it would look like if I went ahead and sold 5 covered calls because each one is $400. But first, let's go look at it on Yahoo Finance. If you look at the placement of where this is in its band, it's actually very similar to Palantir because it's kind of in the upper quadrant of the band, but not yet quite at the top. Now, this RSI, it's still got some room to run before we get into an overbought situation. This is at 60, and we are about right here at 345. So again, if we are green on Monday or Tuesday would be the best situation for me because I'll get the benefit of the rest of the week for this to enjoy good premium, and then we'll take a look at how it goes. So right now it looks like the top of this band is 385. So we're going to go, that's really high. It might be very difficult to get good premium when we're $40 away from the strike, but let's go see what we might be able to get for this. Well, it's actually not bad. Here we go, right here at 385. It looks like our delta is very conservative. We're below 1%, and it looks like we're going to get about $100 for every contract. So good. If I sell 5 of these, that is another $500 that I will be able to gain in premium this week from selling 5 contracts on my Tesla shares. And I went really high at 384. And so I feel really good about that because if we do get that high, more than likely a lot of people will be taking profit and it will retreat and I'll be able to regain my shares if necessary. Are you having fun yet? We're already making so much great money and we've just scratched the surface. This does not equate for the money I'm talking about, the premium. This does not equate for any price appreciation in the stock. If any of these stocks are called away, we're looking at thousands of dollars of profit in addition to the premiums that I'm showing you. All right, let's go back and sell a few more covered calls. Okay, this is the big one. Let's look at MicroStrategy. There's a couple hundred shares here. This has been one amazing stock, and it has really catapulted my portfolio. I do believe in the business model, though, and so that's why I was bold about going into this. That's the first rule when you are running the wheel strategy. Before you ever sell the first put to acquire the shares, you must believe in the stock. Otherwise, you're not going to want assignment, and you're going to work against yourself. And so this has been a great stock for me. Look, this has appreciated already 173%. And I know that the best premiums right now are with MicroStrategy. And so I know this is going to end up being very lucrative when we take a look at it. So let's look at these 200 shares. That's going to allow me 2 contracts. And let's go take a look at it on the Bollinger Band. It seems like all these stocks maybe talked to each other and they decided that they were going to all just be right about the same spot in the Bollinger Band because here we are, same exact spot that we saw our last 2 stocks. Now this one is it was similar to our last stock. It's at 59 on the RSI and the top of the band is 483. So I'm going to shoot for like 485 to make sure that I'm in a safer dynamic if my shares are called away. So let's go look on the option chain and see what we can get this week if we sell a couple of these covered calls. Checking our deltas right here, we are good. We are below 0.2. We're at 0.19. So look at this. This is offering $8.65 a share. I just love wheeling this particular stock. So if I sell 2 contracts of this, that's 200 shares, I'm going to get $8.65 a share. That's going to be another $1,730. Again, if it's called away, I'll reestablish my position, hopefully right at or below 485. Now this stock's so volatile, so if it is called away, there's a good chance that I could get my shares back even much lower than that. And next up is Nvda. Don't you think that's great that I have 601 shares? That's my one lucky share from the last grouping that was called away. I held on to that one share. I always keep that extra one share of Nvda because it has been such a great performer for me. So this grouping of shares is up 21%. I would not mind having these shares called away as long as I could reestablish my position. But let's go see if it's the right time to sell covered calls on Nvda. All right, let's see what we have going on here. This is a different look than what we've been seeing on all of our other ones. This actually is under 50 on its RSI, so it's in a bearish mode. And then if we look at this, it's at the bottom part of the Bollinger Band. So if I want it to shoot high up to the top of the Bollinger Band, the premium's not going to be great. But since we are under 50 on the RSI, I can adjust the way I'm going to look at this trade. And if we're having a green day, I might want to consider this 142, 143 area as potential resistance. But it could push above it, and then we find ourselves in the middle of the band. So I think for safety, if I'm going to try to sell covered calls on this particular stock, I'm going to look at something in the middle of the band, maybe at around 147, just to be safe. Looking on the option chain as it stands right now, this is a low delta. It's below 0.2, so we're at 0.11. 147 is going to yield me about $36 a contract. So I have got 6 of these. Now, I'll probably get a lot more of this because I think that Nvidia is going to push ahead this week, and I'll try to wait to see. But if I go with this particular contract, selling 6 contracts at 36 cents a share will give me $216 on Nvidia. Next up is Robinhood. I have 500 shares at Robinhood, and I grabbed Robinhood shares right when I saw how they were reacting to the Bitcoin movement. This was a few months back. So we're already enjoying an 82% return on this one. So I think we are at the point to start selling some covered calls on Robinhood. Let's take a look at it on its charts. All right, Robinhood on its charts, it's right here in the top quadrant of the Bollinger Band. It's 70 on the RSI, so this is a good point to sell covered calls. I will probably shoot for above this band. It's at 41, around 41.17. I'm probably going to at least go to 42. Let's go take a look at what kind of premium we can get if we do that. Hey, look at this. We're in the 30 cents again. We're at 36 cents, 42. This is very conservative. My delta is 0.17. And so we had 500 shares of that. So that's going to be 36 cents times 500. And that's going to be another $180. There are several other stocks on here that I could sell covered calls on. But if we just use those 5 stocks here at the top, we are already at a point where we are at $2,701. And that does not even count if all of these shares are called away. If they're called away, we are looking at incredible gains. I mean, if you have Tesla shares called away right there, that's about 61,000. MSTR is about 50,000. Nvidia is going to give you about 14,500. And then Robinhood will give you about 8,400 today. So if they are called away at those higher prices, this would be exponential. But I'm just talking about premium. So right now we are at $2,701 in premium. Well, if you multiply that by 4, if you were to do this every week on just a fraction of your positions, that gets me to $10,804 a month. And these are having stocks called away at a point that I could then go around and go back and buy them back again. I hope you found this helpful and it inspired you, like I was inspired years ago, to actually try my hand at selling covered calls. Now, if you want more hand holding while you're trying to learn this lucrative strategy, I do have a few spots left in my upcoming boot camps in January. So if you're interested in that, there's a link below for that. And I've got something for everybody. So I run a thriving Discord community. It's called Ashley's Inner Circle. And we go through trade setups all week week long, and we are just making thousands of dollars. And this market has cooperated so well. So we've really been enjoying some great premiums in our portfolios right now. And, people say it's easy to make money when the market's going up, but it's not easy if you don't know what you're doing. So a market going up can be just as intimidating as a market going down because you want to be able to capitalize on that. So I specialize in how to capitalize in both a bull and a bear market. And so if you're interested in that, the link's below on that. If you're just getting started in your journey and you're not quite sure you want to jump right into all things options, then consider my new trader network. It's a much slower pace, it's a lower price point, but it will allow you to start to learn a little bit and get your feet wet with options. And then you can decide when you're ready to join the larger Discord. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Now, I taught you all about cover calls in this video, but if you're interested in seeing the other part where you sell puts, I want you to watch that video right here.